Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our Experts Online. I've got my cup of tea. I hope you've got a cup of tea or coffee and that you can enjoy a lovely session with us this afternoon. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to go through the housekeepings just so that we get everything sorted here. So please just name yourself, so your name, your organization, and the country you're in. And you can see how to click on there to do the renaming. To avoid any background noise, please mute your microphone if you don't speak, and also mute your phone because often we do hear that ringing. And if you want a good stable connection on your side, please close all other programs that you have here. Your comments and questions are always welcome. So please use the chat or put up your hands and ask the questions, because that's even a nicer way that you can do that. For those of you who need it, English captioning is available, and you just have to click on CC, which is closed caption, on the bottom bar of your screen. So that would be really good. Okay, so today we're going to talk about standards and why do we care about them. So I think, what is a standard? So when I looked this up, it's something that's used or accepted, it's normal, average. It's a level of quality or attainment. It could also be something that we measure, a norm or model in comparative evaluations. And it could also be something set up or established by an authority, and you can measure that by quantity or weight, extent, value, or quality. So that's kind of the idea of a standard. So there are a number of standards that you may or may not be familiar with, and these are done usually by the ISO, which is the International Standards Organization. And so randomly, because I chose things like as toys, right? There's a standard, and this is it, for the safety of toys. So that is a requirement that you need. So you might see some toys can only be used for children over 3 years of age, and that's because they said there's a risk for children to have that under the age of 3. So that's kind of how that standard works. Now, food, I love it. Food's my life, but there is also an ISO standard for food safety management. So what you eat, is it safe? You're not going to be sick? Is there something that might be cancerous? All things like that, and how you manage that food. So that's good. There's standards there. There are also standards that go a little bit more into our field of hearing. And you can see there's there like acoustics, audiometric test methods. Then there are codes of your names of countries and subdivisions, medical devices, so quality management. There's also clinical investigations, which is really at my heart, for example. There's also one on plain language. Okay, plain language, that's interesting. And that's because we have to address the layman. But that's really exciting for me at MED-EL and other medical device companies, for example. But what about hearing? First of all, we can look at some kind of idea, and usually this is like under the clinical care standard, so that goes more into the medical frame, and it's a small number of quality statements that describe the care patients should be offered by their health professionals and health services for a specific clinical condition or a clinical pathway, and this has to be based on best evidence. So it's not gut feeling, it really is best evidence. But what about hearing? What about cochlear implants specifically? So I'm going to hand this over to Prof. Javier Gavilán. Now, Javier is the professor and chairman of the otolaryngology department at La Paz University in Madrid. Okay, he's the professor of otolaryngology at the Autonomous University of Madrid, and he's been there since 1989. He's also the member of 25 different societies, as well as the editorial board and the referee in 10 scientific journals. So we're really delighted to have you here, Prof. Gavilán. And I know you've got lots of things to say, but sorry, you've gone off my slideshow. It's okay, because here's going to be the fun bit, all right. So I always like to see a little bit of fun stuff because, you know, that's Javier in all his formality. but does that rather scare you? How many trees have you flown into there, Javier?
Just one when I started. Then
Okay, all right. I hope you don't do any more of that, but I think something like flying, that must give you a lot of freedom from your work and to de-stress you, right?
it does.
Yeah. Okay, but let's go further now and let's have a look at exactly what you want to show about hearing standards.
Okay, thank you very much, Ilona. Thanks a lot to the MED-EL company for letting me share with you these ideas about standards. I'd rather be flying, but Ilona put me here, so I stopped flying for today and try to work a little bit. So to start with hearing standards, I just wanted to remind you that more than 30 years ago, the WWW became familiar to us. The World Wide Web started to work. But today we are going to use these three W's for a different purpose. We are going to the W concerning what are hearing standards. Ilona mentioned something before, but I will try to explain it a little bit more. Why do I need hearing standards? And finally, where can I find hearing standards from a practical standpoint? Where can I learn how to do these hearing standards for myself? So let's start with what are hearing standards. And as I say, Ilona already mentioned several definitions of standards in general. And standards are documents, are something you can see and touch that provide requirements, specifications, and especially guidelines that can be consistently used to ensure the protection of the patient and improve hearing performance in this case. And I want you to focus on documents, as I said before, documents so you can find them and read them or watch them. They give you guidelines. They are not the Bible or the Quran. They just give you some ideas to follow during your clinical practice. And their main interest is that they consistently give results. If you adhere to these standards, you consistently will have a good result or a good achievement. They're designed basically for the protection, for the patient care, for safety of the patient, and we are dealing with hearing, so they try to improve hearing performance. And what standards are not? Well, they're not barriers, they're not obligations, they're not constraint, burden, restriction, limitation. They don't want you to create a closed cage where you cannot escape. And that's one of the main problem of standards. For some of us, when someone approaches and tell us, you have to do this, you feel that you shouldn't do this because you want to do it your own way. And you can do it your own way, but following some guidelines, as I said before, that can protect your patient and give you the best solutions. So what do I need hearing standards? I know what standards are, but why do I need these standards? And I want to give you a brief summary of something that was published 2 years ago from the WHO, and that was the World Report on Hearing. And this report on hearing demonstrated or showed us that more than 1.5 billion with B people are right now experiencing some degree of hearing loss. And this number may be almost double, may reach 2.5 billion people in less than 30 years. That's a huge number of patients with a huge number of people with a hearing problem. And we all know, and this is demonstrated also in this report, that hearing loss has been linked to decreased quality of life, with cognitive decline, and with some disorders like dementia. So this is a serious issue. It's not just that I cannot hear, it's that my life will be worse and I may get cognitive problems. And additionally, this hearing loss is not affecting just the patient. It will also affect those surrounding the patient, that is, family and friends. And this is why in 2021, also very little after the publication of the WHO report, the hearing group, and I will tell you more about the hearing group in a while, the hearing group realized that this was so important as to do a roundtable, an online roundtable on the World Hearing Report. And that was done on 2021 on 6th of May. So this is really important and we care about this. Why this is important? Look at this slide. In this slide, you see the number of people that need a hearing aid of some kind, of some sort, and do not have it. And the number of the percentage of people not using a hearing aid and needing a hearing aid is reaching 83%. 83% average people that need a hearing aid do not have it. And this may be as high as 90% in the African countries and as high as 77% in the European nations. So it's a very serious problem. And if we go to cochlear implants, for instance, the number of people needing a cochlear implant and having a cochlear implant is only 4.1%. So more than 95% of the people in the world who need a cochlear implant do not have one. And the WHO report was recognizing that cochlear implant is one of the most successful of all neural prostheses developed to date. So we are, in our hands, we are having a very good tool that is not reaching the people that need them. And the main issue for this, the main reason for that is that money doesn't reach this field. However, we have to be aware, and this is what WHO report says, that during the next 10 years, every single US dollar that we put into health systems to improve hearing will return around 1 to 16 US dollar. So this is really not spending money. This is investing money because this is giving us much better results in the future. The WHO Director General stated that the cost of doing nothing is the only cost that we can afford. And to try to solve this situation, we have to reorient the model of care so that people have access to relevant interventions close to their homes. So we cannot have large hospitals away from the people. We need to bring care to the patient. And also, we have to give them access to high quality clinical services, secondary or tertiary level facilities, by means of a good creation of acceptable referral pathways. So we have to bring health, to bring care to the patient. Bring care to the patient is the main issue that we have to face to solve this problem of not having access to hearing solutions. For this, we need efficient referral pathways, as I said, because the hearing implant journey from the moment we start seeing the patient that needs a hearing aid of any kind, this journey is probably the longest journey in medical field, in medical care. So we are having the responsibility of taking all these way from the very beginning of diagnosis to the follow-up and maintenance of all the solutions that we are going to give to our patients. There are more reasons to create standards in the WHO report, but I'm not going to spend more time on them. Just remember you that the WHO says that cochlear implantation should be seen as a neuro-linguistic urgency, because we have a very short frame of time where our intervention may have results. If we go further, and I'm referring to children, if we go further than 6 years of age, this will no longer be an option. So we have an emergency, an urgency need of treating patients, children with hearing loss. But on the other end of life, we have to develop hearing screening for adults. And this hearing screening should be followed by the provision of hearing aids or hearing implants. And this has also to be promoted. Quality standards, and we are dealing with standards today, and the WHO says that quality standards are valid globally. So this is not just for emerging nations or for very well-developed countries. This is globally useful and should be seen as the minimal requirements. This is the base over the one we have to build the whole hearing attention to our population. Finally, where can I find? Okay, I know what standards are, what hearing standards are. I know where and why I need them because I understood this. And now, where can I find them? Where I will be finding these solutions that I'm talking about. And I mentioned this before. The hearing group. The hearing group is a group of centers all over the world dedicated to hearing implants. We work on all kinds of hearing implants, from bone conduction implants to brainstem implants, including cochlear implants, active middle ear implants, all kinds of implants. Right now, we have 32 centers all over the world. We're covering the 5 continents. We're in America, in Asia, in Europe, Africa, and Australia. And we are improving this network, and we have more centers in Europe because this was developed in Europe, but we are trying to cover the whole world because we are aware that the need in underdeveloped countries, in emerging nations, is really important. We have, I'm showing here just 6 of the hearing standards we have developed, but we have up to 10 hearing standards right now that you can see in our webpage at www, and these are the World Wide Web, hearing.com. And there you can find hearing standards for bone conduction devices, for middle ear implants, for cochlear implants, for special situations like AAS or for single-sided deafness. You can find all these standards written. These standards, they all have the same basic structure. They have 2 subsectors. We deal with, on the one hand, with resources, and on the other hand, with the processes that you need to develop to be on the good side of the quality of hearing. Resources include 3 different items. We try to define how the team structure should be developed, accommodation for the patients, and clinical facilities. So the interaction between these 3 situations are developed on every one of these 10 standards that right now we have. And if you visit our webpage, by the way, just a short comment, we had yesterday a problem on the webpage. So if you are trying to access now the webpage of the hearing, you will probably experiencing some problems, but this will be solved very soon. So go again and try to find our standards. And concerning the processes, these include 13 different steps that cover this that I mentioned. It was the longest journey of medical care. And these standards are covering the whole hearing implant journey, from referral and selection to patient feedback. So we try to follow how these things should be done step by step. Finally, the hearing standards are not the ones we have done at the hearing group. They are not static. I mean, things change very much. When I started with cochlear implants, for instance, more than 30 years ago, cochlear implants were only for completely deaf, bilaterally deaf patients. Right now, we are putting cochlear implants in single-sided deafness. So this means that the idea of standard should not be a fixed picture, but a video, but a movie dynamic showing you the changes and adapting the standards to the new situations. So basically, this is what I wanted to tell you. Hearing standards are necessary for quality control. We need to be good for avoiding mistakes and complications. And this is extremely important. This is for patient safety. If we follow these rules, these guidelines, we will be less, we will have less probabilities of having problems. Our patients will be safer. They will have better results. We will improve functional results and satisfaction. Remember, quality of life was affected by hearing loss. So if we improve hearing, we will have a more satisfied patient. And finally, to match the WHO needs, which are not the WHO needs, are the needs of the people that we are having the duty of giving solutions to the problems. Well, thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Javier. I think you've given really a lot there for us to think about and I don't know, put in my brain, but what are we really interested in here? What is quality and how do the standards help quality? Because I think that's what we're trying to say, that everyone has the same.
Well, I think we're trying basically to do in this field. I mean, not as you were mentioning before, not toys or food. I also like food, but hearing. What we want better hearing. So we want to be consistently in the situation of obtaining a better results, outcomes on one hand, and on the other hand, safety. We don't want to have mistakes. We want to have all the path be very well defined so that our patients feel more safe and the results are better.
Do you think this also brings about consistency? And how would that work?
Of course, consistency is basically the idea of the standards. Is for you in South Africa and me in Madrid to have very good results. We just have to follow guidelines, because your situation in India will be different to the one in the United States. But the ideas of how to do it are similar, are the same. So consistency is meaning you have to have the same results here and there, irrespective of your level of quality of life or your national income or any other situation. But we need to be able to provide patients the consistent same results.
Yeah, I agree with that, because we want anyone around the world to know that if I get a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, I'm getting the same level of care no matter where I live, and that's important. I just want to say to everyone who's joined us today, if you want to ask questions, please put your hand up. You know, you're dealing with two experts in standards here, and so it's your chance, or otherwise put something in the chat. And so if we see you doing it, I'll be asked to go to your chat and whatever, but I will carry on here. Right, so Javier, I am starting a brand new CI clinic. Okay, out somewhere. Not in Europe, because we've got lots there. Yeah. So what do I need from these standards? What are these standards going to tell me? What should I do? Well, specifically,
if you go to the hearing standards, which are the ones right now, I mean, there are more than these. They're from the international societies of hearing loss and dealing with hearing loss. You will also find some other standards, but concerning the hearing standards, which are the ones that I know by hand, you will find two different situations. You will find the basic structure, the team structure, accommodation, and basic structure that you need to create in whatever place in the world you are going to do. And of course, you will not have maybe a fancy clinic with air conditioning and music if you are in an emerging nation. But the basic situation, the team, you need an audiologist, you need a surgeon, you need a place for the patients, you need accommodation, this basic situation, and you will adapt them to your particular practice. And then you will need to know how you should go from one step to the other, from this long journey, from the moment someone tells you, I think I don't hear well, to the moment this patient has been fitted with a hearing aid, a cochlear implant, and a bone conduction device, whatever, and then how you follow this process, and then how you solve the problems if there are problems. What's the path to solve technical problems as well as medical problems, and finally to obtain the level of satisfaction of the patient, to know how satisfied your patients will be.
Right. So that's a lot there. But now I see that the hearing group, for example, have a large number of standards. So why don't we only need one standard? Why do we have to have different standards? Is there anything specific that those standards bring out that you should say we should think about?
Absolutely. Of course. I mean, just think about the two ends. Think about the bone conduction device and think about the brainstem implant. Well, basically, the structure should be more or less the same, because you need more or less the same. You will probably need more specific experts on the ABI than on the bone conduction. But basically, the structure is the same. But the way you solve the situations and the journey will be completely different, because just putting a bone conduction device from the adhesive ones you have, so you need much less support, to the more complex bone conduction devices. This is not the same as going for a brainstem implant. So they are different. And the situation, using another example, the situation for a cochlear implant in a deaf child is not the same as the situation in an elderly patient, or not the same as the situation in a patient with a single-sided deafness and tinnitus. So you need to adapt the idea of what are my rules, my basic way to go from the diagnosis to the solution. It's like going from I don't know, Paris to London. You may go from Paris to London on different roads depending on what you want. I want to see the countryside. Then I will not take a direct flight from Paris to London at night. So basically, this is the idea. You need to adapt your paths to the needs of your different situations in hearing loss.
And I think, like with the hearing group, I think from what I see, they have a lot of different things. And I think, like you said, with quality standards, it's an evolving process. Everything is dynamic. And so I think having a lot of those standards rather than just one that's just for bilateral sensorineural hearing loss, for example, gives people more options and more ways to create that standard, no matter what they're fitting. So if I went hypothetically back to starting my clinic, I might only start with adults. That's fine, to get my experience or something. But then suddenly, a lot of people with single-sided deafness come and say, help me or whatever. Then I have those kind of standards and whatever. So it might be a difficult question to end here, but how are the standards going to get more people in to get a cochlear implant? Because I know we've matched and we're working very hard to match what the WHO has said. And it's just been a delight to have that document, because it's pushed hearing forward, hearing loss, how we can manage things neurolinguistically, cognitively, whatever. But it still says we're not having the people come in who should get it. What's your take on that?
Wow, that's a tricky question, Ilona. Okay, first of all, you need different standards for different situations, as you mentioned before. When I started, I'm going to tell you my experience. At that time, in 1990, there was no standards at all. but we realized that we could use cochlear implantation in adults. So we started with adults, and it took several years until we create the frame for cochlear implants in children, because you need a completely different situation, both from diagnosis, for the treatment, for the facilities at the hospital, accommodation, parents, not with adults, yes, with children. So, and finally, rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is not the same for children and for adults. So it's a completely different situation. Now, is this going to bring us more patients? Of course, but not only to cochlear implants. This is going to bring us more patients with hearing loss that want a solution, because 83% of them don't have this solution. So this will bring us more patients. How can we do this? How can we improve this situation, this coming of new patients? This is very difficult, as I said before, and probably you need to adapt very specifically to the health system of every single country, to the situation of every single institution. But I would give you a word of how to improve this. And this word is awareness. We need to improve awareness. We need to know the people, not only the potential patients, but the people in charge of health systems in every country, to realize that this is a problem, because the idea of hearing loss as a problem is not in the mind of those running the health systems of countries. They're concerned about diabetes, hypertension, cardiac problems, but hearing loss is a serious problem. It's not that I can only communicate, I cannot communicate with you, but it's also cognitive decline, is dementia, is family problems.
All of those things.
Awareness is, in my opinion, the most important part of this problem.
And so we can always strive forward for awareness. I agree with you. Javier, thanks very, very much. Right, everyone, can you put your screens on? Let's see you. We're going to have, as usual, our group photo. So if everyone can get going on this.
Oh.
Okay, we still need a few to show themselves. Right, okay, are we ready? So come on, up with your cup of tea. Perfect, Dirk. Thanks, Tobias. Excellent. Right, are we done? Are we beautiful? All right, so now we've looked at some standards. Thanks very much, Javier. And we want to go a little bit further, because you haven't mentioned all the standards that there are, because we've talked about a process, and that's really good because we have to do that. But there are parts of the process that we need a bit more definition in. And so now I'm going to introduce Prof. Dr. Griet Mertens. And she is the professor at the Antwerp University in Belgium, and she also coordinates the clinical cochlear implant research at the ENT department at the Antwerp University Hospital. Okay, now she is research prolific. Is that a way, Griet? I think, with having done more than 40, I'm sure it's more now, publications in various international national journals. And you've presented a lot of outcomes around the world on very different areas of research. So I think you kind of have your fingers in every pie there, really. And so Griet, we're delighted to have you here. But let's see. Griet also does something for her spare time. Any guesses what she does? And I know about this from a long time ago, and apparently this group also go out on a weekend holiday every year, and I don't think they do what they're trained to do. And so that is, moving on. Sorry, it's just not working. Ceramics. What clay are you using there, Griet?
Without chamot. because otherwise the hands are getting hurt. Chamot, really the smooth one.
The smooth one. You don't want to dirty your fingers. And what do you do? Do you do sculptures, or are you making parts, or what's your speciality?
Oh, speciality. Maybe using, in Dutch it's called mallen. So then you've got like a shape where you put in fluid ceramics. Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard.
Right. All right. So the next time we have to see some of your stuff, that would be great. Okay, Griet, are you ready? Let's hear about some other standards and what you can do with them.
Okay. Thank you, Ilona, for the unique introduction and for the invitation to present today about our minimal outcome measurement test protocol. As you can see on this first slide, there's only my name on this first slide, but that's just because there's not enough space to list all the colleagues and all the co-authors involved in this project. So that is why I introduced this second slide. And I really want to acknowledge all these colleagues and all these co-authors, because without them, the work wouldn't have been possible. So I will refer to these 5 publications in the next presentation, and therefore I divided the presentation into 3 main parts to present to you the minimal outcome measurement test protocol in CI recipients. So in the first part, I will try to convince you why we were convinced that we need to establish minimal outcome measurements. In the second part, I will give an overview of what we agreed upon within the hearing group that should be part of this test battery. And then in the last part, I will give 2 examples of 2 studies in which we've used these minimal outcome measurements to show you the impact on our daily routine practice in the Antwerp University Hospital just by making use of these minimal outcomes. So first of all, why did we establish these minimal outcome measures? In the first place, because we want to monitor and we want to standardize our clinical practice in patients with a cochlear implant. And we know that there's a wide variety across CI centers, across countries, but even across audiologists within one clinic. For example, audiologists are performing at 3 months post-operative test interval or 9 months post-operative, and we really want to have some common minimal outcome measures to be able to pool this data and to build up the evidence in patients with cochlear implants. And also because we believe that having a common minimum outcome measurement test protocol is the first step, is the key step towards international multi-center research to build upon this evidence. Now, to be useful, these minimal outcome measures need to address a number of defined criteria. First of all, they have to be simple, they have to be reliable and valid, but also sensitive to measure changes over time. Also, they have to be useful to the patients, but as well to the clinicians in their clinical work, because they have to be in line with routine clinical practice. It's not some additional work, it should be really in line with what we do every day together with our CI patients. As mentioned before, they have to be sensitive to meaningful changes, and they should address one of the WHO outcome domains of impairment, activities, participation, and quality of life. So before the implantation, we have to be sure that the correct treatment method has been chosen. Therefore, we also use the minimal outcome measurements. But the process does not stop at the implantation. Getting a CI is really a lifelong commitment. So also after cochlear implantation, we use these minimal outcome measurements to show all the parties involved the benefits of having the cochlear implant and to demonstrate the improvement over time and to make adjustments if needed. It's nothing that we did on our own. We did it together with the hearing group, which was already introduced by colleague Professor Gavilán. So the main aim of the hearing network is to provide each potential implant user worldwide with the best possible hearing implant. And so one of the main goals was to set up minimal outcome measures, quality standards. And so in this presentation, we are focusing on the outcome measures in patients with cochlear implants. Now, let's have a look at these outcome measures that we agreed upon. So first of all, we started with the literature search. We focused on all the outcome measurements applied in clinical trials involving individuals with hearing implants in adults and in children. And then together with all the members of the hearing group, we evaluated each of these outcome measures. And then to reach a final consensus, we discussed upon all these comments and these suggestions during our annual hearing meetings. And then we agreed upon the minimal outcome measures for adults in 2011 and for the pediatric population in 2017. We agreed upon the following test intervals, so prior to surgery, and then 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months after activation. And then we also assess this minimal outcome measurement test battery on a yearly basis. If we have a look at the adult CI population, we included unaided and aided audiometry, speech perception in quiet and in noise, and subjective assessment. Why did we include unaided audiometry? Because we want to have an idea about the hearing preservation, the residual hearing in our patients. Important to mention there is that we recommend the use of insert earphones instead of the typical supraoral headphones, just to minimize the vibrotactile responses, since we are dealing with the typical corner audiograms. Then I will show you the classification hearing preservation scale. So if you want to quantify the percentage of residual hearing, then you can make use of this classification formula. And here is just an example. You can easily download it from the hearing website. You only have to enter the preoperative hearing thresholds. Then they are set on the audiogram. The same for the postoperative hearing thresholds after cochlear implantation. These thresholds are also set on the audiogram, and then this sheet automatically calculates for you the percentage of hearing preservation. So it's relative to the preoperative audiogram, and in this case, this is 63% of hearing preservation after cochlear implantation. Speech perception in quiet and in noise. So for quiet there, we recommend to use monosyllables in quiet at a fixed level of 65 dB SPL. And for speech in noise, we recommend an adaptive procedure to test the speech understanding in noise in patients. For the subjective assessment, the HISCI questionnaire is included in the test protocol. It's a 19-question questionnaire. An example of one of the questions is, can you effortlessly distinguish between a male and a female voice? And then the patient have to rate his answer on a 7-point Likert scale, just to have an idea about the subjective sound quality. Now let's move on to the pediatric population. It's a more heterogeneous population. So first of all, we need a minimum of background information of the child just to be able to interpret the results. So we need to know the gender of the child, the date of birth, the implant information, the presence of multiple disabilities, the mode of communication of the child, the linguistic environment, the rehabilitation, the school, the etiology of the hearing loss, the onset of the hearing loss. Because of course you cannot compare results between two children, one with signing language, for example, and with another one with a pure oral communication mode. So that's why we really need this background information to be able to interpret our results. Here an overview of a child implanted at the Antwerp University Hospital with a list of the minimal background information. The test intervals for the pediatric population are in line with routine clinical practice and the same as we have for our adults, so prior to surgery and then again 3, 6, 12 months after operation. The objective measures, they include prior to surgery tympanometry, then the transient evoked action, acoustic emissions, auditory brainstem responses, during surgery, the ECAPs and the impedances. And then for the audiometry, there we also include for the pediatric population, the aided and the unaided conditions, of course, if it's possible, if the age of the child already allows. The same for the speech audiometry, speech perception and quiet any noise is included, but of course, if the ability of the child allows this testing. For the subjective hearing assessment, the little ears is included. Also, language development is part of this minimal test battery, and there we recommend to test the expressive language and the receptive language as well. So for the pediatric population, there the MOM includes objective assessments, tone audiometry, speech audiometry, subjective assessment, and the language development. Now, in this third part of the presentation, I will give 2 examples of how we've used this minimal outcome measurement data that we are collecting in the Antwerp University Hospital, just to show the impact of having a really standardized manner of testing. And the first project was on bimodal hearing. Maybe I have to give first some background information about the country that I'm living in. So I'm working in the Antwerp University Hospital located in Belgium. And in Belgium, the reimbursement criteria were very, very strict. It was only in 2019 that there was a refinement of the reimbursement criteria. So up until then, the reimbursement criteria, the pure tone average of our CI candidates in the best hearing ear should be 80 or worse. And now in 2019, this was refined, and we may also include patients with pure tone average of 70 dBHL or worse. So that's why our patients with a contralateral hearing aid, the number of patients with a contralateral hearing aid is growing. And that's why we were asking what's the benefit of having a contralateral hearing aid, because this number of patients who will come to the CI selection will have more and more a contralateral hearing aid. So we wanted to investigate the prevalence of bimodal stimulation among our CI users over time, and we want to investigate the clinical benefit of having a contralateral hearing aid in addition to the CI. So we included all patients who met the Belgian national criteria for reimbursement of CI, and they all underwent the minimal outcome measurement test battery. The implantations were between November 2011 and December 2020. And as you can see, prior to the reimbursement refinement, only 41% of our patients was wearing a contralateral hearing aid. And after these refinements, already 62% of them were wearing a contralateral hearing aid. So this amount is really expanding thanks to the new reimbursement criteria. So prior to cochlear implantation, 103, they fit the inclusion criteria. 14% was wearing a hearing aid in the ear to be implanted. 21 was wearing no hearing aids at all in both ears. So in total, 57% ended up in the CI only group 12 months after cochlear implantation. So they were only wearing their cochlear implants. Then 48%, they were wearing bilateral hearing aids prior to cochlear implantation, and 17 were wearing a contralateral hearing aid. However, 34% of them stopped wearing the contralateral hearing aid. So in total, 43 ended up in the bimodal group 12 months after cochlear implantation. So that means they were wearing the cochlear implants in combination with the hearing aid. And so we were curious to see what's the impact of wearing still the hearing aid in the contralateral side. And just by looking at our minimal outcome measures, we're able to see these results. So you see the CI only group in comparison to the bimodal group. A first conclusion was that prior to cochlear implantations, our patients in the CI only group, they have a worse pre-op best aided speech perception in quiet in comparison to the patients in the bimodal group. However, both groups, they improved after cochlear implantation regarding their speech understanding in quiet. But if we then zoom to the bimodal group, we see an additional improvement when they switch on the hearing aid in the contralateral side. There's even a more significant improvement for speech perception in quiet. The same for speech perception in noise. Also a significant improvement after cochlear implantation, just in the CI only condition. But then again, a further improvement when the bimodal group switched on the contralateral hearing aid. Prior to cochlear implantation, only 65%, not only, 65% used a hearing aid in the contralateral ear, and 34% of them, they stopped wearing the hearing aid 12 months after surgery. So yeah, we were wondering what's the reason or what's the difference between both groups? Why did they stop wearing the cochlear implant, the hearing aid? And then we saw that these patients who stopped wearing the hearing aid, that they had significantly worse speech perception in quiet prior to surgery, only 18% speech perception. Whether the patients who continued wearing the contralateral hearing aid, they were having significantly better speech perception prior to surgery, around 47%. So what did we conclude just based on this analysis of minimal outcome measurements? We were only using this very limited test battery. However, this limited test battery is sensitive to meaningful differences in patients with hearing abilities. And we believe that this is a key step towards international multi-center research. What did we conclude on this bimodal stimulation? We see that expanding CI criteria will lead to more and more bimodal users in the future. And we observed an additional significant improvement of the bimodal condition over the unimodal condition. So it is reasonable to encourage our patients to continue wearing their contralateral hearing aid. Then the second study that I want to show as an example of using the minimal outcome measures is about the different age groups. So we were interested or we wanted to answer the research question, is there a significant difference between different age groups? So first we went looking to the speech perception in quiet, and there we didn't observe a difference between the different age groups. Also for speech perception in noise, there was no difference or no significant difference between the three age groups. But then if we look at the HISCI questionnaire, there was a significant difference between the groups. The older the patients, the worse the subjective reported sound quality. And so this just as an example that also the HISCI questionnaire is a really valuable tool included in the minimal outcome measurement test protocol. So to sum up the presentation, first of all, why were we convinced to use a minimal outcome measurement test protocol? To be able to share and to extend evidence on cochlear implants and to guide future clinical practice and research efforts. Then we give an overview of all the included minimal outcome measures that we agreed upon within the hearing group, the different intervals and the minimal set. And then I gave two examples on how we've used the minimal outcome measurements and the impact on our daily routine clinical practice in the Antwerp University Hospital and the results of the research in which we've used these minimal outcome measures. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions
Right, Griet, that was great. It was really great. And I really like the link of how you've created a standard, right? That is a minimal standard, so everyone can do it. And how you can actually use that to do great research without having to do too much. Does that make sense? You know, you don't have to do 5 million things to get some really, really nice data out of there. I find that really impressive. So well done. Okay, Griet, someone asks here, so Ganka asked, were there any other questionnaires considered in addition to the HISQI?
Many questionnaires. Yeah. And that's what we end up from the literature search. There are many questionnaires out there used in clinical research in the CI field. However, we needed to end it up just with one questionnaire because it should fit within a minimum set. And then in the end, we agreed upon the HISQI questionnaire. But I can imagine that you want to have a questionnaire in there about the quality of life of your patients, the listening effort or the cognition, or but yeah, in the minimal set there we agreed upon the HISQI questionnaire.
Yeah, and I think just to carry on with that, Griet, is that it is a minimum, right? This is the minimum that people have to do. So if you have the facilities and the time and whatever, of course you can add anything over and above that, right? So if you wanted to look at the SSQ, that's great, because the HISQI really specifically looks at sound quality, whereas like the SSQ looks at also spatial and hearing and things like that. So I think there is a lot of scope. It just really depends on your facilities and that kind of thing, right? Now, here's a question I was going to ask you about. Are there different types of hearing aids, or do you have to use a specific hearing aid? Okay, specifically, then to kind of link into that, Takwa said, do you have recommendations for hearing aid adjustments in the bimodal fitting? So maybe let's look at what hearing aids can we or can't we use, or do you have to only use one? And then how do you fit them?
So for this minimal outcome measurement test protocol, we were just registering what's the condition of the contralateral side. Is the patient wearing a hearing aid? Is the patient wearing a bone conduction device, a middle ear implant, or no hearing device? So that is why we were able to say something about the benefit of wearing a contralateral hearing device and the bimodal condition. But the limitation then on the other hand is that of course you are limited to this retrospective data. So therefore we are not able to make conclusions about a combination of a specific type of hearing aid in combination with the cochlear implant. However, it was very encouraging to see that we were able to demonstrate the benefit of having a contralateral hearing device independently from which type or which hearing device or which bimodal fitting. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, so that's good because, you know, a patient come in with what they have and they can use it. Or another question, I know there's another one in the chat, but those who didn't come in with a hearing aid, would you encourage them to use a hearing aid afterwards? What would your suggestion be on that then?
Huh. Yeah,
I've got to ask the tough ones.
Yeah. Not right from the start, that there's a reason why they not come in with a hearing aid in the contralateral side. First, I would go for an optimal fitting with the cochlear implants. And if there is some residual hearing in the contralateral side, there's always the option to try a hearing aid. But I think that, yeah, that would have been the step before cochlear implantation to try this hearing aid trial. Yeah.
And so about the question about fitting, is there any recommendation for the hearing aid adjustment?
There we always look for a perfect balancing between the two sides. So in frequency, a balancing, in a degree that it's possible, a loudness balancing in the degree that it's possible. Yeah, and then I would say for balancing in frequency, there you can go for like an anatomy-based fitting, for example, that you are aiming perfect frequency match in the contralateral side and in the CI ear as well.
Yeah. I think it's such an evolving thing, right? That's what we have to look at from now on. Okay, I have another question. I know we're going to run out of time, but it goes back to the minimal outcome measures. And Hamidreza says, how do we evaluate the treatment? So how do we say we've done these outcomes? What is the treatment? Is it successful? How do we evaluate that?
That depends on what the outcome is called. If you want to look for bimodal hearing, for example, in detail, then I would add specific test outcomes like localization or sound quality. But yeah, this is beyond the scope of this presentation. With the minimal outcome measures, we really want to answer the typical clinical questions that the patient is asking about. Is it useful to keep on wearing the contralateral hearing aid? Or I'm a little bit older, can I expect the same outcomes as our younger CI recipients, really clinically oriented. But if you are interested in outcomes or whether a treatment is successful, what is success? Is it quality of life? Then you have to add a quality of life questionnaire. But yeah, that's not the main aim of the minimal outcome measures.
Okay, there was one more question which I think I can answer for you. Is that they said you use the spin test, but actually I think you just used it as an abbreviation for speech and noise. Is that correct?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, well, everyone, thank you, Griet. Thank you, Javier. I think we've had a really interesting session today. I think we've learned a lot about why you have standards, that they bring quality, consistency, care, no matter where you are around the world. And those standards are not just for what indication you have, but also looking at how you test those outcomes. Because like both of you said, we are on a very, very long journey. It's like a marriage. I think it lasts longer than most marriages anyway. So I think that's really, really important. And I think what you've done is also provided that what we do can result in outcomes, some really nice outcomes, so that you do the minimal outcome measures, for example, and you get some good outcomes, even with the minimum level. And in and of that, there are more standards that we haven't covered here today at all, like rehabilitation standards. So I want to say thank you both, and thank you everyone who's joined us. I think we've had a good session. Oh, Javier wants to say one thing.
Just a short comment. I got a message that the hearing webpage is now working right.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So anyone can go onto the hearing website, I guess, and see all the standards that are there. And I think thanks to the hearing group for doing so much of it. Okay, so now, thanks everyone. I think it's been a good session, and we can see exactly what we should be doing and really looking at quality, because quality is important, because we want our patients to get the best they can, and that is through quality and good care. So I want to thank all of you very much, and have a good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.